Yá'át'ééh, my relatives. Good afternoon. This is Mark Charles. It is Thursday, June 23rd, and I'm sitting down with my second cup of coffee. I was planning just to do a very brief and light cup of coffee this morning, and maybe even do some Q&A. I still may do that. There's a few things that happened since I started thinking about this. There's a few things I want to talk about, but if I'd like to take some time at the end just for some general Q&A. So if anyone has a question you'd like to ask about things we've talked about earlier this week, or things I've been teaching on, or even things from my book, feel free to put that into the comments. Preface it with question in the comment. That way, when I scroll through, I can see what the questions are and hopefully sort them out a little bit quicker than normal. But yeah, there's just a few things I wanted to talk about this morning. But before I begin, I want to start, as I always do, by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from Piscataway lands. I live here in Washington, D.C. with my family, but the Piscataway are the people indigenous to these lands, and I want to honor them as the stewards of these lands and thank them for their stewardship of it. I know for those who join me every day, this may sound redundant, like I just keep saying the same thing over and over, but it's actually very important that we remind ourselves whose land we're living on. Everything else about our lives and about where we go and what we do cause us to forget, or even cause us to distract us from the fact that these lands were once inhabited by other sovereign nations and peoples, and they were illegally stolen, colonized, and ethnically cleansed. And so we need to constantly be reminding ourselves of that and make sure that we do not forget those things. So if you've been watching the news, when I sat down this morning to plan this second cup of coffee, I literally just wanted to take some time and have some light conversation. Um, and I'm planning a Q&A, but literally as I was sitting here, the headline came out that the Supreme Court issued their opinion on a fairly pivotal gun control case that came out of New York State. I'm going to put this into the comments right now. I see Phil Fox is on. Yá'át'ééh, Phil. Hey, thanks for joining. I see Shantina is on. Yá'át'ééh, Shantina. Thank you for joining. Anyway, I looked at this opinion. I was not aware this case was going through the court right now, but I read the headlines, and that intrigued me enough to actually go back and look up the actual opinion, which was also published today. I'll share that with you right now. This is the opinion of this case. It's in a PDF format coming from the Supreme Court.gov website. It's the state of New York Rifle and Pistol Association et al. Versus BRUEN, Superintendent of New York State Police. And what's at issue in this state is apparently the majority of states in the country have conceal and carry weapon permits that shall be issued. That's the language in the law. If you apply, you shall receive this thing. And there's 6 or 7 states, including California, the District of Columbia, Massachusetts, and New York, that have may be permitted. They use may instead of shall. And what that does is it leaves it up to the discretion of the authorizing entity to determine whether or not to issue that license. And that was the case. That was what was in question in this case in the Supreme Court, that the opinion came out today. And New York was saying that unless you have a specific reason to carry a concealed weapon, you would not get a license. There was some danger or something else going on. But again, most states have if you apply for it, you shall get your license unless there's some obvious reason why you shouldn't, kind of a standard set of reasons, where New York and California gave it up more to the discretion of the licensing agency. And so that's what was brought to court. And today, the opinion given by the court, written by Justice Clarence Thomas, basically threw out New York's law and said that the right, and I can actually read you part of this. I have this story shared. Let me put it up here. So this is the Supreme Court story here. This is the opinion of the case here. And let me just bring this up. This is the syllabus. But if we get to the opinion, Justice Thomas delivered, we recognize that the Second and 14th Amendment protect the right of an ordinary law-abiding citizen to possess a handgun in the home for self-defense. In this case, petitioners and respondents agree that ordinary law-abiding citizens have a similar right to carry handguns publicly for their self-defense. We too agree and now hold consistent with Heller and McDonald that the Second and 14th Amendments protect an individual right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home. And so, again, the other thing that was a question was, you have a right to carry it inside your home. This is about carrying it outside your home. And so they ruled that, yeah, basically, it sounds like all states now will have a shall language in their laws and not a may language in their laws, which takes away the discretion of the licensing entities like the New York Police Department, the state police. And again, this is problematic. There's a lot of concern being raised, especially by gun control advocates, who are saying, this is going to increase the amount of weapons on our streets, especially in some of our largest cities, like New York City, like Boston, like Washington, D.C., and like Los Angeles or San Francisco. And so, yeah, basically kind of took away what they were trying to do in those states and applied the shall carry a concealed weapon in all states. And as I read this, right, it brought up a ton of different emotions in me. And you've heard me talk before about my opinion of the Second Amendment, and you've heard me say that our country is not mature enough to have a constitutionally protected right to carry a weapon. And on top of that, the Second Amendment is dripping with racism and white supremacy. And so I firmly believe that guns should be a privilege, not a right. And that just like driving a car, if you can demonstrate that you can use it properly, you can do it without hurting people, and you renew your license at a regular basis, yes, you should have a right to carry a gun. But to just have a blanket, you have a constitutionally protected right to carry a gun, regardless, we're not mature enough as a nation, as we've demonstrated daily with our mass shootings around the country. We demonstrate this daily, that our society is not mature enough to handle the Second Amendment right. And our government and our law enforcement agencies demonstrate on a regular basis that we're not even mature enough to give this right out without letting it drip with white supremacy and racism. And so, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. And so I tweeted this morning, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Some of this was said in jest. Others of it was just as I was thinking about this. I said, I think it's time for countries around the world to issue travel advisories, warning their citizens about the very real and increasing danger of gun violence when traveling to the United States. I'm actually surprised that more nations don't have travel advisories for their citizens regarding coming to the United States. Right? With the number of the fact that we have literally daily mass shootings in this country, sometimes at random, sometimes targeted. If there were other nations that had gun problems as bad as ours, I'm quite certain our government would issue some sort of travel advisory, some kind of warning, telling our citizens, hey, if you go to this place, it's very dangerous. And I think it's time. I really do think it's time that other nations issue travel advisories warning their citizens about the very real and dangerous threat of gun violence that they have of experiencing even randomly when visiting the United States of America. Maybe that would help our country to wake up. I doubt it would. I mean, I'm not positive, which is why I kind of said this in jest. I think we would just double down on our own notion of our myth of exceptionalism. But who knows? It might wake a few people up to at least see through the eyes of the world how we're seen and how this land is experienced. So, anyway, that came out this morning. The second thing that came out is, and this has been in the works, they've been talking about this for a little while. President Biden is proposing a tax holiday on gas. Now, if you watch my second cup of coffee regularly, you know already I talked earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, about gas prices and how the United States of America has some of the lowest gas prices of any country in the world. And it's largely because our gas is subsidized by our government, and it taxes our gases at an incredibly low rate compared to most other nations. We have an 18-cent federal gas tax on our gas. That's pennies, literally pennies, compared to what other nations have, especially our European allies. And our gas prices today and last week of over $5 a gallon is about on par with what most of the world's gas prices were 3 years ago. On top of that, we're facing a global climate crisis. We know we need to wean ourselves from fossil fuels. And it baffles me that President Biden, who stated he wants to do things about climate change, but as soon as the price goes up, which actually would cause us to think about our consumption, he's doing everything possible to lower the price of gas. Everything in his power. He's releasing 1 million barrels of oil a day from the strategic oil reserves. He's calling on oil companies to refine more oil, to drill for more oil. And now he's proposing a 90-day tax holiday on our pitiful gas tax in the first place. And this plan, again, if you read the article by NPR, most economists don't think it's going to work. And because there's nothing he can do to make companies drop their price of gas. Yes, they can stop collecting the federal gas tax, but there's nothing to prevent Shell and Chevron and Arco and all the other oil companies and gas companies from charging the same amount per gallon and just pocketing the 18 cents. Some economists are predicting this could literally lead to billions of dollars in increased revenue for oil companies and have a very minor impact on the actual price of gas for Americans. Plus, it takes away money that we're using, even this pitiful little amount, 18 cents per gallon, that we're using to fund roads and other projects around the country. And so, it makes no sense why Biden is not doubling down on climate change right now and doing everything he can in this very opportune moment to wean our nation further from fossil fuels instead of doing everything that he's doing to lower the price of gas. If you would like to read his more about the proposal, this is from the White House's website. I'm putting this into the comments right now. This is the fact sheet put out by the White House about what President Biden is calling for. And I guess the fortunate thing is not only are most Republicans opposed to this idea, but actually a lot of Democrats are cool to this idea. It's not a popular idea, and most people think it doesn't. It's not going to work. Again, Biden. I would argue, this is largely a political move by Biden, who's trying to be seen as the president who's very concerned about people's finances and is doing everything to help them save money. I would think this is largely a political move by Biden and not a real strategic or a sound financial policy move. But it's what he's doing to, I think, raise his poll numbers and increase his chance of getting elected again in 2024. But anyway, so those are some of the things going on about that. And if you would like to go back and watch my second cup of coffee, excuse me, where I spoke about gas prices, I'm going to put that in there right now. And this is that second cup of coffee where you can read about my thoughts on the gas price hike. I wanted to share with you one other thing, and that is I am thinking about and beginning to plan my book tour. You've heard me talk about this book tour for quite a while, and we did one stop in New York City about a month ago, and I'm planning really a cross-country trip to promote my book and to make stops at different places around the country where I can give some presentations on the book and then do book signings and just get the word out more about this book. We're doing this largely because the book was released in the middle of the 2020 election campaign when I was running for president, and so I didn't have much time to promote it. And then immediately after the 2020 election, we went into actually in the middle of the election or the campaign, we went into COVID and incredible lockdowns. And so we never really got to do a book tour. And this book tour isn't being funded by my publisher or any other agency. It's really, I'm kind of self-funding it, raising some money for it. But I'm planning a cross-country trip. And I want to show you, I'm looking at the routes. I'm going to show this to you because I actually need to start getting some connections for this route to make it happen. So let me share this part of my screen with you. So I'm looking at taking about 10 to 14 days to go across the country. And starting in Washington, D.C., we would go first up to Buffalo and would love to do an event in Buffalo, possibly at a church I partnered with there in the past. And then moving either down to Detroit, or if we can't get a plan in Detroit, I would like to go down to Akron or Columbus, Ohio, and do an event in one of those two places. So that's the second stop. The third would be going back to Grand Rapids and doing another event in Grand Rapids, and then going down to Chicago and doing an event in Chicago. This is where my co-author used to live. He now lives in Pasadena, California. So doing something in Chicago. And then driving up to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and trying to host an event up there. This would take me right past Madison, Wisconsin. And so possibly looking at doing something along this route somewhere in Wisconsin, possibly in Madison. Then looking at going down to the northern corner of Iowa and trying to do at least one or two events in Iowa. And then jumping across and going over to Pine Ridge through South Dakota. I'd love to do an event in Pine Ridge. And then dropping down to Denver and doing a day or two events in Denver. And then coming down to Albuquerque and Gallup, where my family lives, and doing at least one or two events in Albuquerque, and hopefully an event in Gallup, and maybe even one on the Navajo Nation. When I was in the Navajo Nation, a few weeks ago, I met with the director of the Navajo Nation Museum, and we're talking about the possibility of me doing an event, a lecture at the museum. And so we're trying to plan that. But anyway, those are some of the proposed routes for and stops for my book tour. If you are along that route somewhere and you would like to work with me to help plan an event in your area, please reach out to me. Direct message me on social media or contact me through my website. I'm looking to try and plan events in these areas, and then obviously to promote them and get as much word out as I can along this route. I'm looking at leaving sometime the third week of July, most likely, and traveling for about 10 to 14 days, taking almost 2 weeks to travel down to the area into New Mexico from here. Then we'll also be going into California later in August. And so I'm looking at doing some events both in the LA area as well as in the Northern California area. Omaha, that's a possibility, Tam. So by all means, if you have an idea for something in Omaha, reach out and let me know. That's in the general area. I hadn't looked at going directly through Nebraska, but that's definitely a possibility, and I'm very open to seeing if we can make something happen there. So, yeah, so those are the thoughts about that book tour. If you want to kind of follow the progress of that book tour, or if you want to help me help support it, I have a GoFundMe that I started, and I'm really trying to raise money for the travel and the expenses of this book tour. So we can. I really want to make this happen. I think there's a lot of legs left in our book. I get messaged frequently about Unsettling Truths and people who read it for the first time, and they're so grateful for the way it speaks into our nation's problems with white supremacy and racism. And so I really believe that this book can still move the needle on the dialogue regarding systemic racism and white supremacy and the doctrine of discovery, not only in our nation, but especially in the church. So I'm going to do everything I can to help promote this and get the word about that out there. Yesterday, if you follow me on social media, you'll know I did an interview online through a channel called Conversations with Faith Leaders. And I spoke with Dr. Brandon A.J. Davis, who is the pastor of an AME church. And he has a podcast called Conversations with Faith Leaders. And he and I, he read my book, and he and I spoke yesterday. This was both on his YouTube channel as well as streamed on his Facebook. And we had a very wide-ranging conversation. We were scheduled to talk for about 45 minutes to an hour. We ended up talking for 2 hours. And we covered everything. We covered a lot of stuff. We covered gun control. We covered Roe versus Wade. We covered so many different aspects about the doctrine of discovery, about Christian nationalism, about white supremacy, about our nation's history. We talked about Juneteenth. I mean, we had a very wide-ranging discussion. And so if you'd like to watch that, I just put the link in there for the YouTube channel. And here is the link if you're on Facebook and you'd like to watch it there. The YouTube channel link is bookmarked right to the start of our talk. And he actually started with about a 6-minute video regarding a church's work to repudiate the doctrine of discovery. The Facebook page starts at the beginning, so there's more dead air at the beginning of the video. But if you go in like 6 or 7 minutes, I think you'll find where our discussion starts in there. But anyway, yeah, if you have, you don't have to watch the whole 2 hours, but it was a very wide-ranging conversation, very engaging. I really enjoyed it. I haven't had such a kind of free flow conversation like that in a long time, and so I was very grateful for that. Let me scroll through and see if anyone dropped any questions in here. I see Jordan has joined today. Yá'át'ééh, Jordan, thank you for joining. Steve, Yá'át'ééh, thanks for joining. It's great to have you on here. Shantina, thank you. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining today. Let's see who else is here. Jeremy. Jeremy asks, have you asked Andrew Yang whether you can join his forward party? So I would love to talk with Andrew Yang, Jeremy. And this is what's funny. He follows me on Twitter. Surprisingly, he followed me some point during the campaign. I think he started following me, or either during the campaign or shortly thereafter. And I've actually messaged him. I've DM'd him several times on Twitter, and I've never heard back from him. I've never heard back from Andrew Yang. I would love to talk with him, but I don't know, aside from messaging him, I don't know people who know him. And so I'm not quite sure how to get his attention. I am following his work on starting his forward party, and he's going the same route, right? There's another party out there called the We the People Party that's doing the same thing. And they're really trying to start a very viable third party to bring another party into our political system. And I looked at that and I thought about that. The challenge I see with the third party route, which both Andrew Yang is going and the We the People Party, and of course we have the Libertarians, we have the Green Party and others like that, is in the long run, while you may be able to get more sustainability and get something moving longer, it really is a lot of work, and you have to invest a lot of money into getting this party off the ground, and you have to do a lot of organizing and bringing a variety of different voices together. And that's one of the reasons why when I ran in 2020, I chose to run as a true independent, because I didn't want anything to distract me from the message that I felt like I wanted to say. And I wasn't thrilled about the idea of submitting that to essentially a committee, right? Where it would have to be vetted. And of course, you get someone on the committee who says, well, this isn't going to play well. This isn't going to, not going to be popular. We're not going to get elected. And suddenly now that's all been dropped. And I didn't want that to happen. And so I decided not to go through a third party, but instead to run as a true independent, so I can remain some autonomy in my voice and in the things that I really felt like needed to be advocated for in the election. But yeah, I'd love to talk with Andrew Yang. I've reached out to him several times. He's never responded to me on Twitter. And so unfortunately, I have not had a conversation with him yet. I see Tam put in a fairly large comment. I don't have time to read that all now. It looks like it's around gun violence. Thank you for adding that in there, Tam. Who else here? Tam also said, why not Omaha? That's great. I would love to go to Omaha. So if you can reach out, Tam, I'd love to look at what the possibilities are. Jeremy added another comment. Let's see who else. Looks like that's all the questions for now, but I really, I want to thank everybody for taking time to join me today. If you are interested, I've said this before, I am still continuing to press forward with the book. And through the end of the month, every signed copy of Unsettling Truths that sells from my website, I am donating $5 to help the families of the victims in Uvalde, Texas. And so if you have not bought the book yet, or if there's family or friends that you would like to buy the book for, now would be a great time to buy it, because not only will you get a signed copy of the book, but $5 of that purchase will be donated at the end of this month to help the victims of that horrific shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And then finally, I'm looking right now at my Patreon schedule through the end of the month. Another great way to kind of partner with me in this work and to help support this work is by subscribing to my Patreon. And we have 2 Q&As scheduled yet for the next 2 weeks, one with myself and one with myself and a guest. The guest I'm hoping to get, I haven't been able to confirm this yet, is actually a boarding school survivor. And a good friend of mine who, if we can find a free space in her schedule in the next 10 days, would love to bring her on to talk about boarding schools and her work, to share her story and just to allow you all to meet her and to introduce her to you. And so I'm hoping to get that. That will be on my second cup of coffee, but we'll also have a more in-depth Q&A on my Patreon. And then I'm giving a lecture on my Patreon. So on the Join the Conversation tier of my Patreon, which is $20 a month, each month I give a lecture. I've talked about the trauma of white America. I've talked about American exceptionalism. I've talked about Christian nationalism. And the lecture I'm giving this month is very similar to the lecture I gave earlier this month when I spoke at the Museum of Indigenous Peoples in Prescott, Arizona, where I talked about our nation's legacy of breaking treaties. And looking through the lens of the doctrine of discovery, why does the United States feel it has the right to break treaties without consequence? And so I'll be giving a lecture on that. That will be posted to my Patreon probably early next week. And then I'm going to schedule a Q&A a day or two after that so people can ask some questions regarding that. But that's all on my Patreon. And so not only if you subscribe to that, do you get access to that lecture each month, but you will get access to all of the archive lectures and the archive comment from previous months. Just earlier this week, I did my Unsettling Truths book study with Seung-Chan Ra, and we looked at chapter 5 this month. And so if you join the tier, the Unsettling Truths tier, not only will you get access to this month's study, but you'll get the archived access to all the previous studies from earlier in the year. So it's a great way to kind of support the work that I'm trying to do, as well as to get access to some more exclusive content, as well as some regular chances to do virtual Q&A. And so we do that several times a month on my Patreon site. Anyway, that's kind of where things are at. I hope everyone is having a really good day. This is a pretty, I was hoping this would be a pretty light day, but this news came out. I really wanted to talk about it. And so thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I hope that the rest of your week goes well. We've been getting some rain here in DC yesterday and today, which I'm very grateful for. But it also means I haven't been able to watch the sunrise in a few days. So hopefully over the weekend, I think tomorrow will be clear enough where I can watch the sunrise. And so it's beginning. We had the summer solstice just a couple of days ago. And so the sun is beginning its slow journey back to the south again. The days are getting just a little bit shorter every day. Yeah, so I'm hoping to do a sunrise later. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to go out and watch the sunrise. Anyway, yeah, my relatives. Hakonat, walk in beauty. And may we learn how to walk in beauty together.